The history of why pencils are yellow might surprise you. We'll tell you all about it on a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True. Well, hey there, welcome to The Internet Says It's True, where every week we learn something that sounds made up but is really true. And this is part of the WCBE podcast experience and available on all podcast platforms, also on the NPR app and the NPR website. Hey, my name's Michael Kent. What's up? This is episode 206. Thanks for returning to the show again this week. If you haven't already, please make sure you help us out by leaving a review of this show. If you're like a listener every week, and you want to give back, this is the best way to help, and it costs you nothing, obviously. But if you do that, take a minute, give a 5-star rating, but make sure you also are leaving a few words as a review, because that holds more weight than a rating alone for some reason. So that would be much appreciated.
I was thinking of giving this place 5 stars.
Also, don't forget to pick up your show t-shirts and mugs. They're awesome quality. You can get those on the website. That's the internetsaysitstrue.com. There's a little thing there. You can click merch. You can buy the stuff right there.
I gotta get that t-shirt.
And finally, before we get into this episode, the single thing that allows me to do this podcast every week is the Patreon. We call people who join there Tizitors, and it is the best way to show your support of the show. So if you consider yourself a fan of the show, please take a minute to go and become a Tizitor. You don't have to do that, but it is greatly appreciated. It's patreon.com/Michael Kent, and you can join at any level from $1 on up. And when you do that, you get access to the bonus stuff there. But mostly, it's just a way to give back. So if you feel like you've gotten some value out of this podcast, it would mean a lot to me for you to become a Tizitor. Once again, that's patreon.com/Michael Kent. I'll see you there. This week's topic was something that my dad emailed me the other day. I found it interesting, so let's talk about pencils. I love pencils. Any chance I get, I'd much rather use a pencil than a pen, personally. I don't know why, but there's just something that's really cool about writing on paper with a pencil. It's like I'm using a rock to scrawl on a tree. It's archaic. And I also remember growing up in the 80s, they'd tell you not to put the tip of a pencil in your mouth or you might get lead poisoning. Do you remember hearing that? Well, the truth is, pencils haven't contained lead since, well, they've never, ever really contained lead. There are reports that some of the ancient Romans and Egyptians used lead to write on papyrus, but not in the form of what we now know as a pencil. Pencils have never contained lead. And that's one of those things that sounds like I'm making it up, but it's true. I always thought, like a lot of you, that no, of course pencils don't contain lead now, but they used to at one point, kind of like Coca-Cola used to contain cocaine. But it's not true. They've just never contained lead. The wooden pencil that we know and use never ever had lead in it. And the reason people started calling the dark inner part of the pencil lead was because that's what they mistakenly thought it was made from. What we call lead in a pencil has always been graphite-based. Originally, they were all supplied from the same source, a single huge deposit of graphite that was found in Cumbria, England. It was discovered in the first part of the 1500s, and this vein that was discovered was the purest and most solid that have ever been recorded at the time. They called it plumbago, something like that, which was the Latin word for lead ore. Because even the people who discovered it mistook it for a type of lead. As they mined the graphite, they found that it could easily be shaped into sticks, and those were commonly used for marking sheep in those early days. Eventually, they started mixing the graphite with clay and other substances to try to find the best writing tip. It wasn't until around 1812 when a cabinet maker named William Monroe in Concord, Massachusetts, invented what we know as the pencil. Now that has also been attributed to Henry David Thoreau, who strangely enough was also in Concord at the time. There's also a claim that an Italian couple named Simonio and Lindiana Bernacotti came up with the idea in the 16th century. Their pencil was more similar to the flatter carpentry pencils. None of these people patented, so Eberhard Faber did and started mass-producing them in a factory in New York in 1861. They were using graphite found in New Hampshire in 1821, but for the most part, as pencils became popular around the globe, England had a monopoly on producing them because of the Cumbria graphite vein. And that monopoly lasted until the graphite there ran out in the 1860s. In the late 1800s, there was a pencil boom in the US, with factories producing them with names you've heard, like Faber and Joseph Dixon of Dixon Ticonderoga. Every day in the US, Americans were using 250,000 pencils. If you're interested in this stuff like I am, you'll be interested in a piece written by economist Milton Friedman back in 1980. He delivered it on a PBS series called Free to Choose about the free market economy and whether or not you agree with Milton Friedman's economic principles. This is certainly interesting. I'm going to play the whole thing in its entirety. It's about 2 minutes and 40 seconds, but I promise this is interesting.
Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. To cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. It was imported from South America by some businessmen with the help of the British government. This brass ferrule, I haven't the slightest idea where it came from, or the yellow paint, or the paint that made the black lines, or the glue that holds it together. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. When you go down to the store and buy this pencil, you are in effect trading a few minutes of your time for a few seconds of the time of all those thousands of people. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was a magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum. That is why the operation of the free market is so essential, not only to promote productive efficiency, but even more to foster harmony and peace among the peoples of the world.
It's a wonderful little piece to analogize their free market ideas. It's not original. He stole it without credit from a writer named Leonard Read, who came up with the idea in 1958. Maybe Friedman sees stealing the work of others as part of the free market too. But none of this answers the question that I had. Why is the stereotypical pencil yellow? If you Google image search the word pencil or look at clip art of a pencil, you'll see one that's school bus yellow, the famous yellow pencil. Why? Why were pencils most commonly painted yellow? Well, after the break, we'll find out. And listen for our new advertiser, Mochi Health. The world of medication-based weight loss is taking off and can be really scary if you don't know where to turn to for the right information. We've got a great solution for you as a new supporter of the show. Mochi Health is an incredible holistic telehealth platform. It basically connects you with board-certified doctors and dietitians, and they'll help you determine the best course of treatment to reach your health goals with medication delivered to your door. And we're talking about science-backed medications like Ozempic that you've heard of. They make it affordable, personalized, and it doesn't matter what insurance coverage you have, they'll help you find a solution that fits your lifestyle and your weight loss goals. Again, these are FDA-approved GLP-1 medications, and it just couldn't be easier. I want you to go check out joinmochi.com. That's JOINMOCHI.com. And because you listen to this podcast, you get $40 off. Just use promo code INTERNET. Again, that's joinmochi.com, promo code INTERNET, or use the deals link in the show notes.
We're living through the most dynamic time in human history, and what we do as leaders matter. We are the ones that create the leverage to shift directions of our companies, our nonprofits, and our communities. As a leader or an emerging leader, please join me for a dynamic conversation with top thought leaders, academics, and executives to learn more about how to elevate your leadership. I'm Maureen Metcalf. Join us at the WCBE podcast experience at wcbe.org.
There was a time that humans used 100% organic products as healing balms and moisturizers for their skin. Well, I've partnered with an awesome company that wants to get back to those times. Fatco sells organic and responsibly made tallow-based skincare products. For centuries, humans used tallow in skin moisturizers and healing balms, but unfortunately, the topical application of these fats seemed to stop around the same time that animal fats stopped being considered part of a healthy diet. A lot of modern skincare products do more harm than good by stripping your skin of its natural oils. Let's change that. You can try them out now at fatco.com and get 15% off your order by using my promo code INTERNET. Go to theinternetsaysitstrue.com/deals for the link. If you love listening to this podcast every week and you want to show your support, that would mean a great deal to me. You can do that by becoming a Patreon member. We've got members at all levels, whether you want to pledge $1 a month or $10 a month. Just think about the value that you receive from this show. And if you like the histories and the stories that you learn about or the jokes that you hear, and if you think that they're worth it, consider signing up. For that, you get every episode ad-free and a week early, access to bonuses like the unedited videos of the guest appearances, and 20% off all merchandise. You can sign up today at patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent. When pencils started being used around the world in the mid-1800s, most of them were just natural wood colored. Nicer pencils would have a lacquer on them, and pencils with lower quality wood would be painted darker colors like purple, red, maroon, navy blue, and black, and this would help disguise the imperfections in the wood grain, which was usually cedar wood. Then, toward the end of the 1800s, at the World's Fair in Paris, this all changed. The 1889 World's Fair in Paris, the Exposition Universelle, is famously remembered for its shining new marvel, the Eiffel Tower. There were lots of things that were famous about this World's Fair. It was the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. Lots of cutting-edge technology was shown to the people, like cinema, electricity, and mechanical wonders. Annie Oakley put on a shooting demonstration. And the Hardtmuth company from the area that's now known as the Czech Republic launched a rebrand of their pencils as the Koh-i-Noor Hardtmuth pencil. Koh-i-Noor is Persian for mountain of light. And at the time, people knew that word Koh-i-Noor because at the time, the largest diamond in the world, which was part of England's crown jewels, was called the Koh-i-Noor diamond. So they used this word that had a connotation already of royalty and elegance to brand their new pencils, which they called luxury pencils. According to Duke University professor Henry Petrosky, who wrote a book called The Pencil, A History of Design and Circumstance, the best graphite in the world had come from England, but eventually that supply ran out and a newer and far superior supply was found in Siberia, near the border between Russia and China. And so for these new luxury pencils, Hardtmuth was using this newer, better graphite supply so they could advertise their pencils as the best in the world. And there was something else different about them. They were bright yellow. Nearby the Siberian graphite mine, the Empire of China used the color yellow to represent royalty. The Yellow Emperor was a mythical cultural hero that had been revered for centuries, and modern-day royalty in China were the only ones permitted to wear the color. In China, yellow represented glory, happiness, and wisdom, along with being high class. In addition to bright yellow paint, the Hardtmuth company even dipped some of them in 24-karat gold. The cost of these pencils was something like 7 times the cost of a normal pencil. They did everything they could to make these pencils stand out from the other ones on the market, and people loved it. The Koh-i-Noor pencil was so popular, the company actually changed their name to the Koh-i-Noor Hardtmuth Pencil Company. It wasn't long before word of these pencils reached the US and other companies followed suit. Faber and Dixon Ticonderoga started painting their pencils yellow and even went so far as to give some of their pencils Asian-sounding names. Their pencils were inferior to the ones using the real Siberian graphite, but by this point, people didn't care. There's even a crazy story about Faber. They did a field test of the popularity of their pencil colors. They gave half yellow pencils and half dark green pencils. The pencils were identical in every other aspect. The people who got the green pencils hated them and returned them because they said they were bad quality. This pattern can be seen with retail markets all throughout time. One company creates a luxury product, they create a demand, and then other companies try to cash in on it. I had some shoes when I was a kid. They were LA Gear, which was like a cheap knockoff brand of shoe. But they had these little clear rubber windows in the heel. They were trying to knock off the popularity of Nike's Air Max, who had manufactured a premium sneaker with a bubble of air in the heel. The LA Gears didn't have a bubble of air. The ones that I had, it was just a clear rubber window. But they were making a cheaper product that was meant to sort of look the same. And that's what all these companies were doing with the pencils. It stopped being about the actual quality and more about the appearance. Yellow pencils became the most popular. In modern times, there are only a few companies, in fact, only 3 companies in the US who still manufacture wooden pencils. And while pencils are made in all different colors and the royal luxury stigma associated with the color yellow is probably completely gone, yellow pencils are still what comes to mind when you think of a pencil. It's like the fact that magicians haven't worn a top hat and tux for centuries, but if you Google image search a magician, that's what you're going to get. It's just stuck in time, and that is what this thing looks like. And in the case of the yellow pencil, it's all because of the human desire for nice things. We all wanted luxury, so we got yellow. The internet says it's true. It's time for Yap Yap with me and a friend. Today I'm calling Jay Black. Jay's a regular on the show, one of my favorite guests, and he's an award-winning stand-up comedian, but also a writer, director, and producer. What's going on, man? You were just telling me I'm catching you at home. I think the last 2 times I've talked to you, you've been on a cruise ship.
Yes, we were using uplink satellites to talk, and today we're just using a regular Zoom connection, and it's nice. That's why I'm dressed so casually, and I'm so happy.
You're wearing a Hawaiian shirt, which is what most people wear on a cruise ship.
Yeah,
but you do have it open at the top, showing some fluff, which I appreciate.
I'm going to say my wife bought me this shirt, and I talk about this on stage, and I put it on, and she said, "You look hot." And I was like, that's an odd statement. She doesn't usually say that. And then I looked in the mirror and saw what I looked like in the shirt, and I realized she was just saying that so that I'd wear it because no woman will talk to me while wearing this shirt. It's just a way to uglify me to keep me good.
Yeah, I think my wife has a similar thing, because whenever I talk about losing weight, she's always like, well, don't lose too much weight.
Yeah.
And she's like, you were too skinny before. And I feel like that's just her way of keeping me, not as attractive.
To talk to you. That's right.
Yeah.
If she bought you a sweater vest, you know exactly the reason.
Hey, it wasn't that long ago in my life that sweater vests were a very large part of my everyday. This was in the 90s.
I used to wear them all the time. I was basically Chandler Bing without the 5 friends.
You were also a school teacher at one point, which I feel like gives you permission to wear a sweater vest when you want to.
I will say this. If you're ever a school teacher who happens to be a comedian at night, never wear your sweater vest and pleated khakis to a bar gig in Philadelphia.
To the club.
It's not a good idea. I mean, it's very specific advice, but it's valuable.
I love it. So let's get into this week's. But before we do, there is a new segment where I ask guests to give me a fact that they think that maybe I haven't heard about. And so did you prepare a true fact today? And I'll use the honor method as to whether or not I've actually heard it.
Yeah, this is a pretty interesting one. It's about how TV remotes worked in the 1950s because they didn't have batteries and they didn't have infrared. They didn't have circuit boards. So how did they make a clicker back in the 1950s? And on top of that, why is it called a clicker? The answer is because it worked by ultrasonic sound. There were little like tuning bars inside the clicker, and when you pressed the button, it made a ding, and that ding was heard by the TV, and that ding changed the channel or moved the volume up or turned the TV off. So no batteries were needed, and it was a ding. That's how it worked.
That is amazing. And no, I have not heard that ever.
Yeah.
So you win. That is a winner. So explain that to me. So they hit bars of metal, created an ultrasonic sound. What does that? The bars of metal were inside the clicker?
The bars of metal were inside the clicker along with a spring-loaded hammer. And the TV, if it heard the ultrasonic sound, would change the channel. Now, how that worked, I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know what the receiver system was like. But I can tell you that the remotes that we use now that I'm constantly changing AA batteries in, I feel like are a consequence of big battery.
Big
I think
battery.
Energizer and Duracell have created a world where we need these remotes. Just go back to the clicker system. You never need a remote, and you get a nice firm ka-chunk every time you press it.
Now, the remotes I had when I was a kid did the ka-chunk, but I swear they had like a big red infrared window in the front of them. So I might be on the verge of infrared technology with in the early 80s.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was definitely once the integrated circuit came along, they all switched to that. This is 50s and 60s. This is like
Gotcha.
an interesting workaround in the days before you had solid state electronics. So it's
Which
really
is
cool.
yeah, so I can imagine like a dog barking and the channel changing because it hits that right frequency that the TV's looking for, like things like
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's ultrasonic, but that's why we call the clicker.
wow,
Because
yeah.
in the old days, you were actually clicking a mechanism that hit a hammer, and it's kind of those like the etymology and the physicality of the thing sort of
Yeah.
dovetail.
I love that stuff. I love that stuff. So like this is very fitting that you brought this up as well because I literally have spent the last 2 hours of my day working on my like programming remote system on my like entertainment system upstairs. It's actually kind of complicated because I'm using an Apple TV, but I'm also using a receiver that's going through a Wi-Fi remote system so that I can use Alexa to do everything. And the whole thing is like so complicated. And anytime, and I just got a new Apple TV, so anytime you change one of those devices, it is a nightmare to go back and try
Yeah.
to remember how you had it set up 2 years ago, 3 years ago, last time you worked on it. So that's what I've
Mike,
been doing with my Sunday.
I'm going to say this. I used to have all that kind of stuff, but we're on the road too much. And if one thing, I had one of those remotes that controlled everything. If one sequence gets out of order, like it
Yeah,
thinks the TV's on, so it's sending the off signal, but the
right.
TV's off and it's not turning on. Uh, my wife will call me, not with like a gentle, hey, can you walk me through this? But like, we are getting rid of all of this. And that's what I did. I got rid of all of it. All of my TVs just have built-in Roku, and that's all we use.
That's one way to do it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going through this
I'm
right
not
now.
happy about it.
Yeah. That's what's one way to do it. Just simplify the whole process. So you got me on that one. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure since I've been doing that new segment, everyone who's brought up a fact is a fact that I don't think I've ever heard before, or at least I didn't know the full details about it. So once again, you got me. Here's our question for today. And like always, for this first question, we're going to play for a joke. So if you get it wrong, you got to tell me a joke. If you get it right, I will tell you one. Why are pencils yellow? Is it A, so they're harder to lose? B, yellow paint was the cheapest and easiest to find? Or C, yellow was associated with royalty and luxury?
So I am going to go because I have grown up in this capitalist world. I believe that everything comes down to saving a buck. And if you're making 10 trillion pencils and you can save a quarter of a cent on each pencil, that adds up. I'm going to go with B. It was the cheapest.
The answer, yellow was associated with royalty and luxury. Now we're talking back in the 1800s. Okay, so like late 19th century when pencils. So what happened was they used to, once this was invented, right? This pencil, it was usually just natural colors. But if it was a crappy wood, they would color it dark colors to cover up the imperfections in the wood. And most pencils were dark colors to do that. But this company came through from it was the Czechoslovakian company, or at the time it wasn't Czechoslovakia, it was Czech something. It wasn't the Czech Republic. It was something else. It was prior to the Czechoslovakia. And they were mining the graphite in Siberia. It was a nicer graphite. And they said, this is a luxury pencil. We're going to sell it for 7 times the amount of other pencils. And they painted it bright yellow because in China, near the Siberian mine, only people allowed to wear yellow were royalty. You weren't allowed to wear yellow unless you were in the royal family. And so things that were yellow were special. It was a special color.
Amazing. Couple of things about this that I thought of while you're talking. Number one, I believe that number one pencil should be yellow and number two pencil should be brown. That just makes sense to
That
me.
makes a lot of sense. Absolutely.
Second thing I'll say is, that there were people, because just is the way people work back in the 1800s, who were big timing you with their pencils, who would reach in, like always finding an excuse, like, let me write that down with my 7 times more expensive yellow pencil.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I got to tell you a joke now.
Yeah, you got a street joke? Or just
Yeah.
a joke in general?
I got a street joke for you. 2 guys are robbing a liquor store. And the one picks up a bottle and turns to the other and goes, "Is this whiskey?" And the other one goes, "Yeah, but not as whiskey as robbing a bank."
Ooh.
Champion, professional comedian Jay Black. Champion.
You do this for a living.
That is my job. So it's not going great,
But
Mike.
in your defense, I did ask for a street joke, and street jokes are always groaners. There's rarely one. I did find one in case you got the first question right. It was, do trees poop? Of course they do. How else would we get number 2 pencils? Which
I stepped on your joke with my number 2.
You didn't, because I didn't even need to tell the joke. So
okay.
you set it up. But yeah, poop jokes with number 2.
Poop jokes always work. I did a family show last night. For anybody who wants to know, the secret to a family show: poop jokes. So it's something that it scans the generations, man.
It does. Poops and farts, you can tell to any age. So this book of questions that I got from probably like Spencer Gifts when I was a teenager.
Sure.
And I kept it for some reason. And the one thing that I always remember in this book, that I don't know why that this one stuck out, but these are all dumb questions. It was, if the number 2 pencil is so popular, why is it still number 2? That's one of the questions in this book.
Sure.
Like, for instance, here's another one. Back in the days of fur trading, did they use rat pelts for small change? They're really dumb. Not many of these are good, but the number 2 one has always stuck with me. In juvenile court, instead of mistrials, do they have do-overs? That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I feel like the guy who wrote that joke or wrote that book is probably using it in his credits when he middles for the Comedy Zone. So,
I'm sure, but to give this guy credit, I mean, like this was written long before the internet,
Sure.
So those jokes came from somewhere compilation of he probably spent a couple months compiling those questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things
people.
where, like, before the internet, you realize, like, when you were watching a ball game and somebody brought up a stat, it wasn't just somebody Googling that stat. It was somebody either knew that stat or was looking at a reference book while they were playing on the air. I mean, it was a different time when we were young.
That's actually a good point. Never thought about that. For question 2, we're going to play for a gift. We're going to play for this pencil that says, I don't know if you can read it, but it says, you can't. It says, because F adulting. It's a sky blue pencil. It doesn't say F. It says the actual word, but it says because F adulting. It's a obscene pencil. I got it in a pack of pencils that all have the F word. But we're going to play for this. I will mail this to you if you get this one right.
Got it.
As pencils developed in the late 1800s, how were American pencils different than in other countries? A, they had erasers attached to the end. B, they used actual lead. Or C, they were hexagonal in shape. One of these was specific to American pencils.
I'm going to say, just having grown up in the 70s and 80s and been exposed to every bad chemical you could possibly be exposed to, the fact that we had lead in our gasoline, I'm just going to say they had actual lead in them, because that sounds like something an American company would do, even after discovering lead is terribly bad for you. So my guess is B, lead.
No. I don't know why I was so adamant about. I really was ready to pull the trigger on that one. The answer is that they had erasers attached to the end. Most of the pencils in other countries did not have an eraser attached to the end, not in the beginning. And then the Americans figured out this whole thing and putting the eraser at the back, and then other countries started following suit. Now, I would have said the lead thing too. But this is the craziest thing that I learned while I was researching this. I grew up thinking, sure, pencils don't have lead now, but they used to, and that's why we call it lead. We refer to it as pencil lead still. I found out they never, ever contained lead. Now, there is evidence of early people using lead, like pieces of lead, to write on papyrus in Egypt and stuff. But
Right.
Pencils, as we know them, the wooden things with the never lead. It was always graphite, and the only reason we ever called it lead was because people mistook it for lead.
So it's just basically people are dumb, and when they get an idea in their head, it does not matter if the idea is proven wrong. They'll just keep repeating the dumb one over and over again.
Yeah, a tale as old as time. I mean, we champion mediocrity going all the way back to the 19th century. So,
well, I'm just going to say this. We should use our eraser that's on the back of our pencil to erase our stupid ideas and put in the right one.
If only we could do that. So this was 1858. An American guy, Hyman L. Lipman, which sounds like a made-up name. He received the patent for a pencil with an eraser attached to the end. So there you go.
And you know what? It's like that's such an American thing too, isn't it? Like just make your mistakes go away. Don't think about them anymore. Just erase them and move on.
It's like the way that people pronounce nuclear and it's clearly wrong, but they do it anyway. Or Kamala, like they know that it's wrong, but they don't care.
Right.
They just keep going with it.
It almost becomes a point of pride that I know nothing and I'm going to show you that I know nothing.
Yeah. Now, that said, it gets to a point where the general populace is calling it lead, so that if I were to say, hey, did you break your graphite? You wouldn't know what the hell I was talking about because we know it as lead now. So once it gets to a certain point, everyone has to be on board because that's how language works, right? But like it's stupidity in the very beginning, or not stupidity, ignorance in the very beginning that causes the whole thing.
As they say, yesterday's mistakes are today's rules.
Ooh, I like that. I've never heard that.
It's an old grammar phrase.
You get a bell and applause for that because I've never heard that phrase. Yesterday's mistakes are today's rules. Wow.
Yeah. That's what happens with language all the time. That's why we have irregular verbs. And somebody messed it up 250 years ago, and now it's just the way everybody pronounces them.
When I was in high school, I was the head of the drum section in the marching band, and I wrote cadences and made up not rules but traditions and things. And 25 years, 30 years later, they're still doing those things, and many of them are horrible. And when I went back to be their drum instructor, like shortly after I was out of college, I was learning how bad these things were that I had put into place, and it was too late. I couldn't change them. So my mistakes had become rules. It was horrible.
You codified it into that's just the culture now.
My bad. Sorry, Urbana High School Marching Band. Question 3. For this question, we're going to play for a sticker, as we always do. A 3-inch square, the internet says it's true, bright orange sticker with the show's logo. Before the invention of erasers, which one of these did people use to remove pencil marks? Was it A, water smeared with a finger, B, they didn't, or C, breadcrumbs? One of these is true.
I've been going B every time, and I feel bad for doing it, but I'm just going to say, my view on people is if you don't have a way to erase it, you just leave it there, you scratch it out, you write above it. I'm going to say B, they didn't do.
That makes the most sense, but it was breadcrumbs, which does not make any sense.
What are we talking about? I'm leaving the show. It makes no sense.
No. So this was so far out there, I didn't even bother to research it, but it's true. Breadcrumbs were what people used to remove pencil marks way back in the day. I don't even care enough about this question to research it. If you care about this question, please Google it and let me know if this is made up. But I read it in multiple places that breadcrumbs were an ancient way of removing pencil scratchings.
And it just goes to show you that the ancient people had literally nothing to do. That they had the time to go to the pantry, collect breadcrumbs and bring it out and change their pencil markings. Yeah, I'm glad that we live in a society that has Netflix, and I would never think to do this.
Here's what I'm imagining the question of this, how this worked. People were just always eating bread back in like medieval times, right? And so let's say this guy was, he's writing his family history with a pencil and a pen. Or a pencil and a paper, right? And he's eating bread, and all the bread before the 1900s was just dry. I'm imagining, like just.
But it's a quarter sawdust.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you're eating, the droppings are going on the paper, and he wipes them out of the way and notices that it erases what he's written, and he's like, "Oh, this is useful."
That makes
There.
sense.
That's
And
my
then
fan fiction about breadcrumb erasing.
then he went on to medieval YouTube and he said 5 eraser hacks you've never thought of before. That's what he did.
And
Click here.
I'm going to do it on TikTok, and the middle one is going to be something that links to some product on the TikTok shop.
Oh, that's a great
the way
idea.
yeah. Like
When I see you riding around in a Rolls, I'll be like, oh, Mike actually did that.
I
Good
broke
for
the
him.
mold. Yeah, all right. I cracked the code to TikTok shop. Oh, well. Okay. This is a weird one. Question 4. We're going to play for a joke that never worked. So maybe something in your act that, you tried and failed. You thought it was funny and the audience didn't. That is if you get it wrong. So which one of these is the name for the metal part of the pencil that holds the eraser? Is it A, epaulette, B, aglet, or C, ferrule?
Okay, so I know that an epaulette is on your shoulder, right? That's like a thing for your shoulder. I know that the middle one that you said is for shoelaces. That's like the thing you put your shoelaces through. So by process of elimination, if my brain has not failed me, it must be C.
The answer is C. You got it right. It is ferrule. 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 That is exactly what it is. The reason I chose these 3 answers is because I get these 3 words confused. I always have. I don't know why. Epaulette was, I think they were all just things like, I know that's a thing, but I don't know what it means. I know that they're all things where it's like, oh, there's a word for that, but no one knows what the word for that is, Like especially aglet, which is, it's actually pretty impressive that you knew that was the thing at the end of a shoelace, the hard plastic part at the end of a shoelace. Aglet. Use that in society and see, people will think you're more smarter.
Yeah, people come up and go, oh, that guy's obviously a genius. I should mate with him. That's how I picture it going.
It's not if you're wearing that shirt. Hey, you should try to work the word aglet into your next set. That's
so, my daughter loves giving me a word to say on stage, and I'll tell her about that one. We'll put aglet in there.
Yeah, that would be a good one to do. What can you think of any recent ones that you've had to work into an act?
The last one was brabble. Brabble.
Is that a word?
It's a medieval word for arguing over trifles. So I had to put in brabble. Now, luckily, I have a lot of jokes about me and my wife arguing, so it was easy enough to just be like, you ever get into a brabble with your wife? And from context clues, the audience figured it out.
So this isn't a thing where you're not drawing attention to the word. You're just pretending as if the entire audience is on board.
Right. You got to sneak it in. Your word or phrase, I got to sneak it in. So she tries to find hard ones for me to sneak in.
Our mutual friend, Jonathan Burns, who's he was on the show last week. We used to do this in the NACA booth. NACA is where Jay and I met. It's where we go to get booked by colleges. Used to get booked.
It's where you go to get your soul broken.
That's right. Yeah, this is where you spend a lot of money to get colleges to say, please take me home with you. And it's like being a sad puppy dog at the pound. But Jonathan and I used to have phrases that we would try to work into conversations in the NACA booth.
That's
very
great.
Casually, and it was always fun. We would always come up with it was usually just some random thing that we would have it hanging out casually, have a discussion, be like, that'd be a funny line to try to use, so.
Right. It sure would be crackers and cheese for me to go to your college. I'd love that. Let's make that happen.
There was one about something like, you smell like onion rings. That was the one that we had to use. And frankly, someone came by the booth with giant rings on her ears, so I was able to work it in very naturally. They looked like onion rings. So okay, so a joke that never worked. You don't have to tell me one at all, but
I'll tell you, I got one.
Okay, absolutely, because I feel like I've shared my Golden Girls story a million times on this podcast, and that is I had a wonderful routine about the Golden Girls, and I thought that there was a cult following that college students would understand, and they didn't. It was crickets. They didn't know who Stanley Zbornak was. They had no idea what I was talking about.
Well, mine comes out of a really dark moment. My brother passed away 10 years ago, but prior to him passing away, he was an alcoholic, and he put himself into a coma because he had drank so much. Now, he got out of the coma, and he was clean for 3 years before he finally died of complications with all the drinking that he had done. But it was that there was a moment that happened when he woke up that was like the first big laugh that we had. And it was just like we were laughing so hard we were crying. And it was just sort of like one of those dark moments. And I was like, what if this could work on stage? Because I'll put the context in, and I'll be one of those comics that can take a dark moment and make it light. And as it turns out, Michael, no, I'm
no.
not one of those
Oh.
comics. So here was the thing: my brother comes out of the coma, and we get this news from the doctor that he needs a liver, and he needs a liver transplant. And we were just despairing, like, how are we going to do this? And I was like, you know what, Greg, don't worry about it. I'm going to get you a liver. And he was like, how are you going to get me a liver? And for whatever reason, my response was, easy. I'm just going to go to the high school and tell the kids how cool they look on motorcycles. And that's my way of getting it.
I thought it was funny.
It's funny. It is. My brother laughed so hard he almost went back into the coma. It was like one of those things where it's like,
man.
This was like one of those shared funny moments. And for like a year, I tried to use it on stage, and no matter how I set it up, the audience was just so sad about the story that they couldn't laugh at the bright spot, even though my brother and I found it hilarious in the moment.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that story. It's certainly, my heart goes out to you. And I think, I wonder if it doesn't have anything to do as much with hearing your story as it is like maybe everyone knows someone who has, had some sort of automobile accident. I don't know. I would have laughed at that. But
I think that like there's a moment where you cross over into too real, especially if the rest of your act is kind of frothy and light. Yeah. And then you're like, let's take a moment to consider alcoholism and comas. Like maybe if I had started from the beginning as a darker comic, you could get onto that vibe. So I think maybe it was the juxtaposition of that joke with the rest of my act. But I don't tell that joke anymore unless there is an overwhelming response from this podcast of people demanding I do the joke live in their
galore,
city.
Like everyone's like, I will never go see a Jay Black show again because he censors himself. He plays to the audience, not what that's not art. You don't write jokes for them, you write jokes for you.
Art is getting up on stage and saying things that alienates everybody till they ask you to leave. That is art, ladies and gentlemen.
Or in my case, they just don't come to begin with, and then you don't have to worry about it. You can say whatever you want. My last college show is a school that I love performing at, but it was just one of those nights where we just didn't get many people out, and so the people that were there had a great time, and I actually had fun with it because I was able to change the rhythm and do stuff that I normally wouldn't do and act in a way that I normally wouldn't act on stage. But it just really throws me, man, when I get up there and I set up for the show and I've got a camera and there's a projector and there's the whole thing and then there's 20 people. It's rough.
So last night I did shows in my hometown. So the first show sold out, so I added a second. Second show sold out, so I added a third. And that was my mistake because the third show was not going to sell out. I had like 8 people at the third show. And I went through with it. I did the show, but I had my son introduce me. And my son got up and he looked around and he deadpans, it's so nice y'all came out. This is literally the biggest crowd my father's ever performed in front of. And just floored those 8 people. So I know what it's like. It's not fun, Michael, to deal with small crowds, but it was the change in rhythm can help you find stuff that works that you didn't realize worked. So
absolutely. And it's nice to be able to just kind of sit back and enjoy that they're there. They're going to listen. And it's a big audience can spoil you because it's going to work. A big audience is always going to work. It's a small audience that like you kind of have to listen a little bit more and be a little bit more present because not all the stuff is going to work. And
well, if you're in front of 2,000 people and only a third of them laugh, that's still 600 some people laughing at your joke. So you're getting a good response. Sure. If you're in front of 9 people and a third of them laugh, it's the saddest sound you've ever heard. You got to up your game a little bit.
I remember a gig that you and I did together one time that was a big 1,200 seat theater, and then like it was a very small crowd.
I remember that. Yes, it was you, me, and was it another comic who was on the show?
There were a couple musicians. It was a long show. And and you know, and I think we were competing with something else on campus or something.
I remember that show because I remember turning to the guy who booked it and going, well, there's only like 15 people in this 1,200 seat theater. You have 3 acts on. Doesn't make sense for us all to do our hour because nobody wants a 3-hour show.
Right.
And I remember him looking at me going, your contract says an hour. And I was like, I'm on first, no problem. So I felt bad for you and the singers. I don't know how the singers got through hour 3, but that was a fun one.
That was rough. Yeah. Well, in their head, it was awesome. That was years and years ago, man. That was a long time ago. Okay, so we've come to the end of the podcast. You've gone 1 for 4, and this one is for all the marbles. If you get it right, you're welcome back on the show anytime. If you get it wrong, you're banned for life.
Makes sense.
This is your question. Pen and notebook, phone notes, pencil and paper, laptop. What is Jay Black's preferred writing method?
So my preferred writing method is a Moleskine notebook with a pen while I sip tea and listen to classical music. My actual method is writing phone notes as quickly as I can while driving because I thought of a new joke. That's the actuality of it. And I do have like a nice little notebook and I'll sometimes go and write in it. But, you know, I believe in the practicality of what you have on hand. As the old statement goes, what's the best camera in the world? The one you have with you.
Sure.
So the best notes app in the world, I always have my phone. So my phone is filled with bit ideas and bits of voice memo as I think of jokes.
That is the correct answer. And my method is actually the same. I carry a leather-bound Moleskine Kahir. Actually, it's 2 Kahirs. The first one, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. It's the little books, the Cahier. Right. The first one is Gratitudes in the front of the book, and then the second one is my notes in the back of the book. Oh. I always have it with me, but that said, my notes app is full of stuff that I do not know what it means. I go back, I read these jokes.
That's the problem, is that you put in like, why did I write fart and umbrella? Why is there a fart umbrella? Was that a business idea or a joke? Was I drunk? What was happening?
Yeah, I have some really old good ones that I have no idea what they mean. I let me see if I can find one for you. And some of the okay. Oh, no, never mind. That's a food order. It said Drunken Bumblebee, and I was trying to find out what that means, but that was a food order from a restaurant that's no longer around. But yeah, and a lot of these are so. Oh, here's one. This says, pretend to erase Chris as a dick, but keep it toward me and put it back toward facing the stand so when the balloon pops, I go back and turn it over, glaring at him. That's a note from 2019. And that is a huge moment in the show now. Like the biggest moment in the front half of the show was just an idea. And I'm pretty sure my friend Brent Braun and I came up with that idea when I was visiting him. But
wait, let me look at 2019. Oh, here's a note that says, visit a Wuhan wet market. Try everything. Come back home and cough on everyone. I don't know. I remember doing this, but I don't remember the result.
That's really funny. Here's a note that I found on my phone. This is a riddle. The guy who builds it doesn't need it. The guy who buys it doesn't use it. The guy who uses it doesn't know it. What is it?
The guy who buys it doesn't need it.
The guy who builds it doesn't need it.
All right.
The guy who buys it doesn't use it. The guy who uses it doesn't know it. What is it?
Oh boy. I have no idea. What is it?
It's a casket. The guy who builds it doesn't need it. The guy who buys it doesn't use it. And the guy who uses it doesn't know it.
I've informed my children if they put me in a casket, I'm coming back to haunt them. I'm dead. I don't care. Don't buy anything that looks nice. Mulch me up and bury me in the front yard. Who cares?
Love it. Man, you did great on the podcast today. Not in terms of answering the questions correctly, but in terms of being a good guy, which counts for a lot.
Yeah, I'm like the opposite of J.D. Vance. I got the questions wrong, but the humanity correct.
As an Ohioan, that is just triggering for me, man. It is a rough time to be an Ohioan.
Hold on, before we leave, is Ohio in play, Michael?
As of this morning, I saw the first poll that claims that it's in play. I don't believe it because the poll I saw before that was like a 6-point difference. But the poll that I saw this morning is, let me see what the poll is. This is a New York Times poll, shows a close race. It's got Harris down by 1. Or no, it's got Harris. Ooh, it's got Harris down 3.
3 in Ohio?
3, but that's not true. If it is true, that's 1 point, or that's 6 points lower for Trump. So,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's got Harris at 44%,
I saw a tweet
Trump at
that
47.
said Florida might be in play too. I saw a tweet that said, Florida counts all its votes immediately. They're done at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
How great would it be at 10 o'clock, Harris won Florida, and we can all just go to bed and we don't have to worry about it. Because if it doesn't happen that way, it's going to be like 72 hours of stomach ache like it was in 2020. But if she wins Florida, we can just start the party Tuesday night.
Right. We don't have to wait for Georgia to hand count, and all
exactly.
This stupid stuff.
And learn who the president is in 2026.
Yeah. Well, as much as I love Ohio, Jay, I am afraid to tell you, I don't believe that poll one bit. I don't think that Ohio is anywhere near purple like it was when I was growing up, especially within the state, because we're so heavily gerrymandered. And the gerrymandering map is actually a big issue number 1 on the Ohio ballot this year. So we will hopefully get a little bit of a say with the future of the congressional the state districts this year. But yeah, I would love it. There are a lot of states in play that weren't in play before. North Carolina is every day I see something different. It's a toss up right now.
Well, when your lieutenant governor who's running for the Republican governorship is dropping truth bombs on naked Africa or whatever it is, I think that a lot of stuff can happen in North Carolina. Who knows?
Unbelievable, man. Go follow Jay Black on the X. Are you still on the X? You're not on the X.
I am.
Yeah,
I'm on that thing till it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, man. I put all my eggs in that basket.
It's Jay Black is funny. And go look for Jay Black is funny on there. Otherwise, it's jblack.tv, I believe, correct?
That is my website. I got everything you need on it. Go there and you can find me on every single social.
Yeah, you might see him on a cruise ship coming up soon or at a club. Jay Black, thank you so much for joining me today.
You got it. Thank you, Michael.
That's all for this week. Thank you so much to Jay Black for being my guest, and thanks to you for listening. Here's the voice of Eberhard Faber.
Thank you for listening to The Internet Says It's True. To listen to episodes ad-free and a week early, support us on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/Michael Kent. If you learned something just now that you didn't already know, go to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review with 5 stars and a few words. That helps us a ton, because that's how the algorithm works. I don't know what an algorithm is, but just do it. See you next week for a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True!
The Internet Says It's True would like to thank the Patreon subscribers whose monthly contributions help to make this show possible. Sean Brown, Joshua Endress, Dallas Ray, Bryce Swanson, Eugene Anderson, Jim and Joanne Martin, Mitch and Andrew Joseph Kemplin, and the show's official emperor, Kick Track. The show is written and produced by me, Michael Kent. The theme song is by Finite Music Forge, and all audio clips in this episode are used for education and commentary and used under Fair Use Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. You can listen to past episodes by searching for The Internet Says It's True wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see bonus content at patreon.com/Michael Kent.